Hey guys, it's Tammy here, and I wanted to branch off a little bit more on mindset. So yesterday, if you joined me live, we were talking about mindset and how that is so critical to setting us up for success to conquer conflict. Well, today I was doing some work for another course that I'm in about marketing, and I was listening to a video from a fellow named, let me make sure I get his name right, Myron Golden. If you've never heard him, take a Google and listen to some of his work. He is fascinating, and he was really talking about marketing, but what he was saying was resonating with me on conquering conflict and how the principles are the same. And so I got so excited I needed to share this with you because my mind is a little bit on fire right now with his content and merging it with my content, and I can see how these concepts work so well together. I'm going to pop over to my PowerPoints here for you. Let me just quickly change, and I have got to get to the top one here. And so what I want to share with you today is, he asked this question. Let me just get my slides ready here for you. Why do people who struggle continue to struggle? And why do people who succeed continue to succeed? It's a fascinating question. And really, when you embark on any journey, whether it's marketing or conquering conflict, the end result of success or failure is a guarantee. It's going to happen one way or another. So why do people who struggle continue to struggle, and those who succeed continue to succeed? So it got me thinking about how we were talking about mindset yesterday, and the impact of attitude, and how that really sets off a chain reaction, and how it influences how we feel, think, and act within a certain environment and in this context to get the results we want and elevate our performance. Now, there was something else that he had mentioned that I wanted to share because this is profound. He talked about the word decide. So this is a Latin-based word, and the root D is from, and side means to cut. So essentially, when you make a decision, you are deciding to cut yourself off from every other possibility. Now, I want to share with you how exciting that concept is, because when you are cutting yourself off from the possibilities, that means you are focused on one outcome. So let me just put this in context of being in conflict. If you are feeling the weight and the burden of conflict at work, and perhaps it's escalated to a bullying situation or a bully-like situation, and you're not sure how to get out of it, you can decide to do nothing. You can decide to be a victim. And what that means is you are cutting yourself off from the possibilities of being able, of having choices, of creating a different option, of no longer being sick. You cut yourself off from those possibilities. You have now put yourself in the box of being a victim. The same thing is true as if you decide to do something about it. You cut yourself off from being sick, from being ill, from being a victim. You cut yourself off from being hopeless, from without options. You cut yourself off from not being able. Those possibilities no longer exist. So when you decide to own the outcome, when you decide you want to conquer conflict, you are choosing to cut yourself off from all those negative things you've been telling yourself the entire time about how you are not able to do it. And you're focusing on the outcome. So let me just tell you a little bit about Tom and I. Tom was my very first boyfriend. So this relationship, this conversation was pivotal in my young journey through having hard conversations. And it really, when I reflect back, that conversation is probably my first recollection of digging in and leaning into conflict, because we weren't together anymore. I wanted to be, he didn't want to be, and I was 16, he was I think 17 or 18 at the time. I was devastated, and I had to make a decision. I really wanted to understand more as to why we weren't together, because he was like my high school crush. He was my neighbor. We'd always hung out together, so I really had a lot of time with him in terms of friendship before we started dating, and of course he's still our neighbor. So I wanted to know what went wrong. In order to find that out, I had to make a decision that I was going to have a conversation with him. And I made that decision. I called him. He agreed to meet. I took ownership of the outcome. I had no idea how I was going to have that conversation. I didn't know when. We knew when we were meeting, but I didn't know how soon into it we were going to dive into the conversation. So there's a lot of unknowns. I had no idea about the path I was taking to get to the outcome. Now that's a critical factor. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And so in deciding I wanted the outcome, I wanted the knowledge I needed to know, I needed to connect and understand, I put into play my action steps. Call them up, set a time, have a meeting, have an agenda. What I didn't know was how awkward I was going to feel in it and how embarrassingly shy I was going to be. Now, I was a shy person. I knew that. I also knew I didn't have really I don't recall having a lot of memories where I had people modeling how to have difficult conversations. And what I knew is that I did not want to be one of those people who was walked all over. That's what I did know. And so when the pain is so great, you make a change. What I needed to know was, how do I not get walked over again in future relationships? So when he came over to have that conversation with me, man, when it started, I could feel the heat. I'm writing about this in my book, Conquer Conflict, as well. So I want to just share it with you here today to highlight it. I felt the heat of vulnerability, of insecurities, of shyness, of awkwardness, of was this the right thing? Is this the right decision? And the only thing I could think of to do in that moment to protect my soul, to protect myself, was to put a barrier between me and him. I still wanted the conversation so desperately. I still needed to know and have this opportunity to maybe reconnect, maybe get him back. There was that little hope there, obviously. So the only thing I could think of to do in that moment was to grab this knitted blanket by my grandma, and that's kind of what that picture represents here, is the colors. It was a homemade knitted blanket that she had made for us, and it was beautiful. It happened to be sitting on the couch beside me, and I grabbed that blanket, and I didn't just cover up underneath it. I full body. I hid underneath this blanket. Now I could see through the knitted yarn, but I didn't look up very often because I just felt so hot with embarrassment and awkwardness, and I didn't know what to do. And so one of the secrets to success is owning the outcome and letting things evolve as you go. And so that conversation was the beginning of my ability to have hard conversations. Now, I want to also just talk to you quickly about and share with you, maybe ask you, do you want to know how to succeed in conquering conflict? And one of the biggest secrets that I learned from listening to Myron Golden, and I'm still resonating with it, it's still going to evolve a little bit for me as well, is you need to become the person who takes ownership of the result before you know how to do it. So I shared with you Tom and I's relationship and how I took ownership of that conversation. I needed to know things, but I had no idea how it was going to happen. So I'm going to give you 3 secrets here that I think are really important. The first is, when you decide that this is for me, when you decide that you're going to do this and you're going to figure it out and it's going to work for you, then things will begin. That is when you know you are on the right path, when there is a movement and a shake away from your previous attitude towards your new goal. You're owning the outcome even though you don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, or when it's going to happen. But as you work through it, the path will emerge. You don't have all the answers right away, and maybe you do things backwards. Maybe you do things that escalate problems. Maybe you do things that bring up new problems. The thing is, the fact that you are doing it and you are making progress on your path towards your goal is what is going to get you to the outcome and the results that you want. Now, the third secret is that you need to forget what you learned in school. So in school, we're taught that in order to succeed, you need to have the right answer. And this is a lot of the things I hear from people, is that I don't know the right thing to say. I don't know when the right time is to bring this up. Forget school and how they brainwash you into thinking you need to have the right answer before you get started. School does not mimic real life. There is no right answer. There is no right path. This is your outcome, and within every relationship, it's unique. We've talked about the things that every person brings. Like really, if we carried around suitcases with us as we walked into every relationship, we'd have a visual reminder that, okay, yeah, they have faith, they have culture, they have beliefs and values, expectations, they're playing many roles, and they have competing priorities, and then of course their age and their gender, and are they tired, are they hungry, are they fatigued, what do they believe in themselves right now, what are they saying about this situation? We carry all of that with us, each of us, into a relationship. So there can never be one right answer. And so school has really kind of set us up to believe that we need to have, we need to study, we need to read, we need to research, we need to take more courses before we start. Not true. When you own the outcome, you become the person as you go down your path. So what I want you to really take away from this slide is that you do not need to have the answer. You just need to get started. Because life is not like school. Success defined in life is not the same as success as it is defined in school. 80% on a test is not going to translate into 80% success in conquering conflict. You just need to get started. So I want to just kind of summarize this a little bit more and talk to you. I'm going to just come back to you for a sec. Here I am. Because you don't need to see this next slide. I just need to see it because it's got some content on there to help me stay focused. So remember the conversation Tom and I had, my very first, very hard conversation. And Tom, if you're watching, I'm sorry I was such an awkward duck, really. I'd love to reconnect and see how you're doing in life. I know you're married, all that kind of stuff, but just to connect and see how you're doing. That was putting me on the path to conflict resolution, and I had no idea, to be honest, that that was where my life was going to go. Fast forward many, many years when I actually was a target of bullying. Now, I actually don't believe that the intention of my bully was to be a bully at first. I think our relationship evolved into a pattern of bully and victim as a result of our inabilities to communicate and resolve the conflict in a meaningful way. And so if I had had the tools now that I have now, then I don't think our relationship would have resulted in the turmoil that my life did. Just to give you the highlights, the Coles Note version, because this is a 4-year journey of being bullied and then a multi-year journey of recovering. So this was not an overnight success into the life I live now. This was many, many years of work. So as a result of being the victim of a bully, I was so sick. I had 4 stress leaves. I was at home. I was an absent parent. I was distracted with all the thoughts in my head about how inadequate I was and all the things I tried to do and how I was just really, really needing somebody to solve my problem. Like, gosh, why can't someone step in here and help me? I was so full of inability and victim and emotions and franticness that I would tell anybody my story in hopes that they could save me. I was drowning in the feelings of hopelessness. I was drowning in the feelings of inadequacy. I was drowning in the in the feelings of like my perception of a good employee was gone. So I was kind of mourning how did I lose being so valued to being now devalued. I was mourning a lot of stuff. And I always knew medications were not the answer. I always knew counseling was not the answer. All very helpful, but they were not the answer. And one day, sitting at home in all of this hot mess and really reflecting on how lonely my life had become because I was now afraid to leave the house. I was afraid to open my emails because I didn't want to see her name. I was distrusting of everybody and anything because I didn't know who was there to help me anymore and who was there to hurt me. I just felt like the system had abandoned me, my boss had abandoned me, my supervisor had abandoned me, and I was really in this dark and lonely place. And it would have been really easy to let depression creep in because it was already knocking at the door and starting to weave itself into my life. But I remember the day I made a decision. The decision was to cut myself off. This is why this resonated so well with me today, is that I decided that this was not the life I was going to accept. I was not going to accept being a victim. I was not going to accept being an absent mother. I was not going to accept being an absent spouse. I was not going to accept having my integrity and my professionalism questioned. Those are all things that I knew I could regain, and I decided to take my power back. I didn't know how. I didn't know when, but the outcome, taking ownership of the outcome, was so important to getting me started back on that path. And I drew from experiences like when Tom and I had that conversation, and many others in between, where I was successful, where I was able to do something really difficult. I drew on that to help me get to the goal that I wanted, which was I took my power back in those relationships, and I reestablished safe boundaries so that I could have an emotionally safe workplace. And that is what my hope is for you, is that when we talk about mindset, this isn't fluffy, airy stuff. This really is life-changing, pivotal moments. And when you're ready, when you can see yourself being the person who owns the outcome, that is when you'll start to take steps towards it, and you will succeed because you have made a decision to leave all those other possibilities behind. So join me on conquerconflict.com. I do have a free download of 5 tips to conquer conflict, really just getting you started there. And I'd love to hear from you. So if you're listening and watching, give me your questions, share your stories. Let's start to build a community around this and to help others take ownership of the outcomes that they deserve and that you deserve.